penalty as underage possession of alcohol.
Okay.
And I would argue, having been a teenager once myself many years ago, but I think for a teenager, the prospect of losing your license for 60 days is much worse than what the current law provides for possession of marijuana, which is you go to a couple hours of community service and they dismiss the charges altogether. For kids that are juveniles, under the age of 18, they're going to be mandatorily referred to juvenile court. So that won't be a discretionary decision. And the court can get involved and pursue drug evaluation, treatment, that type of stuff. So we think this will be a penalty that fits the crime. We think that the certainty and of the swiftness and the certainty of the punishment is much more effective than the potential severity down the road. No one goes to jail for this in Connecticut. The prosecutors were the first to acknowledge that. This penalty will be enforced, and I think it will, especially for younger people, have a better impact than the current laws do.
Chief, do the officers have the right to lift a license on the spot, or is that something that happens down the road?
I believe that we're going to have the same rights that we have under DUIs, but again, this is where training is going to come into play. There's a lot of aspects of this bill that I'm not completely familiar with, even myself. So a lot of it's going to have to do with training. And I agree with Mike here with regards to we have a lot of discretion. Again, my position as a police chief is I don't want to bring those people in if it's less. And I mean, a lot of it you're just going to be able to see based on sight. It's going to come down to where if there's a baggie with some marijuana in it, and those are the types of situations where you want to make sure if you're going to bring the person in that the person is in violation and it's an arrestable offense versus an infraction.
Just one quick thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the police are now going to have an option they don't currently have. In other words, right now they can either arrest somebody or do nothing. Now they'll have the ability to arrest them, do nothing, or issue a ticket. And I think a lot of police will welcome the opportunity to deal with this in a way that's significant, but won't affect the prospects for financial aid or employment for a young person down the road.
Chief, one of the other things that you testified on was medical marijuana. Where does the association come down on that issue?
Again, the legislature sets policy. We're here to follow what the policy is. We just want to make sure all the safeguards were put in place. And again, we're pretty satisfied that the safeguards are in place in the state of Connecticut. Unlike other states, the limitation on the number of plants that individuals can have, it can't be done in public areas. So again, they addressed our concerns, and we follow the policy set by the legislature.
And I imagine you'll be consulted again because what they ultimately approved was a study of how this should go forward. And Mike, I thought it was interesting for people that aren't intricately involved or intimately involved in the legislative process how that all came about yesterday, because originally there was a bill that would have permitted medical marijuana. Then yesterday, and it looked like that was going to die, then yesterday Penny Bakayaki tried to attach it as an amendment to the bill on decriminalization, and she was pretty much told, not now. Then in the middle of the night, it got attached to another bill, which actually has to do with flavoring of prescription drugs. Why that sort of dance that went on?
Well, it's interesting, right? And first of all, it's important to say Representative Bakayaki has been such a champion on this issue for so many years. She had a personal experience in her family that's motivated this.
Yes, lost her husband and
that's correct.
Had to buy him marijuana, yep.
So, but what she had offered on the decriminalization bill is an amendment that would have allowed for a study of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Had that amendment passed, it basically would have ruined the chances of that bill because it had already been passed in the Senate. If that got adopted in the House, the bill would have to go back to the Senate, likely be lost in the shuffle in the closing hours of the legislature. So instead...
And it actually passed in the Senate with a tiebreaker from Nancy Wyman.
Correct. First time in a while that's actually had to happen. But so what the agreement was during the debate was we agree with your amendment, but let's agree to put it on a different bill so it won't jeopardize the decriminalization bill.
Okay.
And that's what happened. And this is a classic political compromise. And at the end of the day in the House, the decriminalization bill passed with a very significant bipartisan vote. Democrats, Republicans both voting for it. And I think you'll see the same thing with the medical marijuana study. And actually, the governor introduced at the beginning of the session an initiative to legalize medical marijuana. In fact, he introduced the same bill that Governor Rell had actually vetoed a few years ago. But during the legislative process, it came to light that there's a better way to do this. The chief mentioned the mistakes that have been made in California and Montana, elsewhere. We don't want to copy them, but we're going to use as a model more the New Mexico thing, where there'll be licensed, secure growers, basically, a few of them, and licensed distributors. So probably using pharmacists to distribute packaged medical marijuana, so we get away with the necessity.
As opposed to these marijuana stores that they have in California.
Yeah, you will not see that in Connecticut. You will not see that in Connecticut.
Chief, one of the other bills that came up is something that I think everybody who drives is worried about, and that's people who are on their cell phones, or even worse, texting. I was on 84 yesterday. We're doing about 65 miles an hour, and the guy right in back of me is driving like this with his, and he's texting while he's driving, and I'm thinking, you are just an accident waiting to happen. Higher penalties now, and how are you going to enforce it?
Well, it certainly is it's a major concern for law enforcement, and should be. I agree with you. Technology today is killing us. It's great, but too many people are using it at an inappropriate time. Our officers are out there enforcing it today, and we're going to continue to enforce it. And this is clearly, in my opinion, one area where a higher fine definitely will make a big difference. I think it was important last year when the legislature removed the get out of jail free pass, so to speak, when the individual was stopped the first time, and then all I had to do was go out and buy a hands-free device. Right. I think it was important that after the number of years that we've had this law on the books, that they removed that. That was a good move. And I think in this case here, the higher penalty is a deterrent from using those types of devices. It's a major concern, and we're attempting to address it both educationally as well as through enforcement.
You know, Mike, they say that even with a hands-free device, that talking on the phone is still distracting, and there are statistics that can prove that. But texting is just unbelievable to me. I'll be honest, I can hardly see the screen when I'm not driving, much less when I am driving. I don't know how you really do anything to stop that, except take away somebody's license.
I guess, but technology has kind of caused this problem, and my sense is that over time technology will be the solution. And what I think people don't realize is how they leave behind an electronic paper trail as they do these things. So when you get into an accident, it's very interesting. It's easy to prove that you were texting at the time this took place, and that exposes you to lots of liability. So my sense is, as we kind of grapple with these issues, the insurance companies will write in exclusions for people who are texting during that type of thing. So that may end up being more effective than police pulling people over, because, I'm sure your experience is like mine. I'm driving around all the time, and I see always people talking on the phone and texting, and it is scary. But maybe there's a way to have a technology in a car that will disable the car if you're using your cell phone in that way. For example, it won't be long before every car manufacturer is going to have one of these breathalyzer type things in it, and you won't be able to start your car if you're drunk.
It's a good idea.
Maybe a good thing.
And let me ask you about that, Chief. The penalties for DUI are going to be increased. Will it be enough? It seems, with the statistics I've seen, that we've been pretty successful in Connecticut of getting drunk drivers off the road. There's always more to do, but from between the time that I first came to Connecticut 20-something years ago, there's a big difference now.
I agree with you. We've actually been out in front, in my opinion, with the nation in what they've done up here at the legislature in combating drunk drivers. And again, this is additional tools both for law enforcement and deterrence for those individuals. And I think it will help. And again, like I said, the legislature up here has always been pretty much out in front, leading the nation in deterring drunk driving. And I have to commend them for that.
Mike, what happened with the bill that was going to impose the use of ignition locking system if you have already been convicted on DUI?
Well, the bill is passed, and the Governor Malloy is going to sign it. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving had their most successful year, in my memory at least, at the state capitol this year. They came to us and they said, our number one priority is to require the installation of ignition interlock devices in cars of all convicted drunk drivers. And so what the legislature ended up doing was requiring that instead of a long suspension of a driver's license, we now have a short suspension followed by a long period where you can drive, but only if you have an ignition interlock device in your car. Now, this technology is fascinating. It's not simply you got to blow in it to start your car. It continuously requires you to blow in as you're driving, and it's like a it's like a small cell phone connected to a cord, and all of this data is sent to a central location. They keep track of who's blowing into it and what your reading is at any particular time. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving said that in the past they supported long license suspensions, but they've come to realize, and obviously this is true, just because you have a suspended license doesn't mean you can't drive. It just means you can't drive legally. So they said they would prefer a system where that it's okay to drive, but we'll be able to monitor you using this technology and make sure you're not drinking. It costs about $100 a month, so it's not exorbitant, especially compared to the price of gas and the price of car insurance, etc. So if you want to drive, you'll be able to with this thing in your car.
And the emphasis,
I think every
if I might add,
parent and teenager would want it.
Yes. Yeah. And the emphasis now is to go after the repeat offenders versus the first-time offenders.
Right.
Don't get me wrong; we still have a priority there.
Yeah.
But we want to get those repeat offenders off the road.
Yeah. Chief, one last question for you, and that is, there was a bill about DNA samples of people who've been arrested for a serious felony, and it was amended somewhat so it would only apply to people previously convicted of a felony. How's that going to affect cops on the street?
Well, we supported that bill. That was we felt that was a good piece of legislation. Because heck, look, we want to put the criminals in jail. We want to get the right people, and this piece of legislation was really good because it would give us the ability to not only make sure that we're arresting the right person, but we're not arresting the wrong person, and it remains to be seen how it's going to affect us. Some of our DNA legislation has been very helpful. We've been making a lot of cases out there with regards to DNA. We thought this was a good piece of legislation. I'd like to see it pass. It would definitely would help. And can be treated the same way as fingerprints. It's really fairly simple.
Makes sense, yeah.
Have all the safeguards in place. Treat it the same way you do with fingerprints. When a person's arrested for a violent felony, you take their DNA sample.
Is it a swab in the mouth?
That's all it is. Not intrusive. A swab in the mouth. It's fairly simple, and law enforcement officers can do it right at the station, submit it to the state laboratory, as long as the safeguards are in place. And I understand some of the concerns that we may have to make sure that safeguards are in place, and then that data has to be removed if that case is dismissed or adjudicated where the person is not found to be guilty.
Right, so that goes away then. It doesn't hang around in evidence.
I think it's another area where eventually we're going to get there. We just have to work out the bugs in the meantime, but eventually I think we're going to get there.
And by the way, the governor is all for this. It's a very important law enforcement tool. It's really just a high-tech version of the fingerprint. But, if you're a career criminal, this is your worst nightmare.
Yeah. Mike, one last question, and that is something that was discussed so heavily in a number of public hearings and debates in the legislature, and that was repealing the death penalty. What's your feeling on what ended up happening?
Well, as Governor Malloy has said, if the legislature passes a bill repealing the death penalty, he will sign it. This is a very sort of sobering and serious topic at the legislature. They did not have that debate this year. And I think, as was expressed by a couple of members of the Senate, out of respect for Dr. Pettit and that whole pending case, the debate has been postponed until next year. There are very strong arguments on both sides of the death penalty, but one thing we know for sure is it doesn't seem like the death penalty is actually workable in our state. We've had one execution in the last 50 years. That was a person who wanted to be executed, and even then it took him 10 years to get executed. My sense is you'll see that debate possibly as soon as next year, and probably in the relatively near future, the death penalty will be eliminated in our state.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Mike Lawlor, former legislator and now OPM Undersecretary, and Chief Salvatore, thank you so much for being with us. We'll let you go back to beautiful Cromwell and get you out of the Legislative Office building for a little bit till the next time they call you back to testify in a bill. Pleasure having you here. Thank you so much, both of you. And here's what you're going to see on CTN Live today. You might have anticipated it. The House has called a session for 11 a.m., and so has the Senate. We'll go live on TV with whichever chamber starts first. You can watch them both live on the web stream. At midnight, we'll have the General Assembly Joint Convention, the Governor's Address, and the final adjournment ceremony. Here are a few things going on around the Capitol today.